Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
It's
How are
so
you
nice
all?
to see you. And that's RJ up there.
Yeah, hi RJ.
Nice to meet you, Tom.
Nice to see
Tom,
you.
I loved your book,
Hmm.
Tempted to Believe. And my first question was, how did a skeptic wind up in Fairfield, Iowa? And can you tell us what Fairfield, Iowa is? I don't know if RJ knows. Do you know RJ?
You mean the town?
Yeah. Do you know about it?
Not really.
Oh,
Okay,
Fairfield?
so let's start there. So Fairfield, Iowa was this town of about 9,000 people back in 1975 or whatever. Um, there was a college campus here, which called Parsons College, which had been here for many years. It turned into kind of a party school and a draft dodging school, and it got way out of hand, and it collapsed. It was a traditional school for many years. I think it had a religious root originally, but they did all kinds of expansion. They went wild, and it went absolutely flat bust, like in the early 70s. So we had this abandoned campus in this little town of 9,000 in the southeast corner of Iowa, which is 60 miles from the nearest real city, which would be Iowa City. It's really kind of in the middle of rural Iowa. And so the Transcendental Meditation movement, which had been wanting to start up a college, and was doing that, just started it in Santa Barbara. They said someone found out that there was this dirt cheap college that nobody wanted. So they bought it for a song because it was just going to, it was just going to ruin here. It was just weeds growing and no one doing any maintenance for a number of years. I don't remember the year that it died. So they bought this university. Anyway, it started out and it was a cool experiment, and it was a regular university with fantastic faculty who happened to meditate. And but then things developed in the TM, Transcendental Meditation movement. It got more and more, a little bit more esoteric in some of its pursuits, and particularly there was this push in the mid 70s, around 76, to talk about the possibility of human beings being able to levitate or even fly. And
right.
that was just a huge departure from what TM had been up to then, which was this simple meditation technique. Anyway, people got intrigued, and started taking these courses and learning this thing. And I could talk about that later, but at some point, there were thousands and thousands of people who had learned this technique or practice to learn how to be able to levitate. And um, the call went out. Maharishi, the founder of TM, was always interested in seeing if there was a way he could influence the world in a very big way. And for years, he thought if we could just get 1% of the population of the world to practice something like TM, that would make a world of difference, to the peacefulness and the orderliness of society. Um, but then with this new technique, which was supposed to be, almost infinitely more powerful, um, the idea now became, if you could get just a few thousand of these people together to practice that technique together, that alone would influence the quality of life for the whole world.
And the
Mm.
So
technique, you mean the yogic flying, the flying.
yes, yogic flying is how it was eventually named. Um, so anyway, long story. I'm just trying to get around to Fairfield and how it really started becoming something. So in 1979, there was the first gathering at Maharishi's request in Amherst, Massachusetts, of about 3,000 people practicing this technique. And during that course, Maharishi decided we have to keep this going. And so he asked people to move to Fairfield, Iowa, if they could, so that they could keep that, not just have this be a couple week thing, but an ongoing group practice. So that put a big influx into Fairfield. And then the biggest influx was in 1983, Maharishi put out the call to get at least 7,000 people to come to this town, which only had 9,000 population,
Wow.
to practice this thing. And it was called the Taste of Utopia. It would give the world and us a taste of utopia. So 8,000 people actually showed up.
Wow.
And there's so much one could talk about. It's so fun and so interesting. But anyway, so that was the thing. And my wife and I were two of the people who came in December 1983 saying, not only will we check this out because it sounds really interesting, but we'll just quit our jobs and stay there permanently, which is what we did. So we've been there since 1983, along with, maybe 1,000 or two other people who stuck it out that whole time. So that's Fairfield. It's this place. It certainly is the largest group or the center of activity of the Transcendental Meditation movement in the United States, and probably the largest and strongest group in the world. That's how it's been since the years that I just told you. And we can get into a lot of interesting things about Fairfield, but your question, James, about how did a skeptic end up there? So my journey was, I think James, you were raised Catholic, right? Yeah, me too. And I went to a Jesuit high school and stuff, but around 17, that all came apart intellectually for me, and just absolutely dropped it. Then when I was in college, maybe a little bit more deistic kind of thinking came in, just the laws of nature are sort of God, you could say, or what's in control. A little bit of loosening or opening there. But then maybe it was psychedelics. I don't know what it was. A lot of my peers, when they were, having their minds opened through some drugs, a lot of the people that I know who are Transcendental Meditation teachers certainly got a boost in the direction of more possibilities by their use of some psychedelics. And that may be true for me as well. So for whatever reason, I started to get interested in the idea that there's more that could be experienced. Let's put it that way, more that could be experienced in the mind than what I was. And because TM at that time, we're talking 1972, 1973, it was already pursuing scientific research on the efficacy of the meditation technique, which, these days that's happening a lot, but back then there was virtually none. TM was the first that really had research done. And so that intrigued me as a rational kind of creature, a combination of, more possibility and scientific basis. Let's try it out. So tried it out and kind of got sucked down the rabbit hole a little bit, not completely, but I liked what I experienced with TM. I liked what I learned about, I suppose, Vedantic philosophy, as I pursued it. All these things were attractive and interesting. And by the time we got to the mid 70s, 76 or whatever, when this yogic flying came out, I was willing to entertain it. It's not like I went, yes, absolutely, this is happening. But it was intriguing. I had friends who had done it before and made claims, that, oh, yes, at one point my body lifted up and I went, oh, wow, this is really interesting.
So, Randy, my teacher was James Randi.
Yeah.
He wrote about that in Flim Flam. And I thought when we talked about it, he said you had to bounce, sort of. Is that true? Because this was Randy.
Yeah.
You sort of bounce around and move your legs, and then you try to go up.
Right. Well, you don't try to go up. It's a fascinating thing. In fact, the TM movement does a lot of research, but there's certain research it doesn't do. And I would be fascinated for someone to really explore what the hell is going on during that yogic flying technique, because it is mind-blowing, at least initially. So, I learned it in Interlaken, Switzerland in 77, I suppose. And it was one of the most mind-blowing experiences of my life. So you're in this room that we filled with foam covered with sheets, because you do go up and down, and it can't be a hard floor.
Right.
And we start doing this technique, and sure, we know what it's for, but we never experienced it before. We don't know what goes on. We just know what it's for, what it's supposed to do. And all these guys in this room, maybe 30 of us were in the room at the time, start going through these reactions in their body that, movements, maybe more jerky or unusual movements that you've never really seen before. And then, hopping,
Right.
not trying to, believe me, just like
Right.
the legs, you're sitting cross-legged more or less, and all of a sudden, your legs want to, and you go up. And I think it's just fascinating to know what the hell is going on there, where, granted, you had some placebo-worthy background in the sense that you were learning this, but we had never seen it done. It's
Right.
not like this was public. This was totally private at this point. We had never seen it done. We had no way to know what we were supposed to be getting out of it or have happen to us. We just start innocently doing this mental technique, and these reactions happen. And but yeah, to get back to your question, yeah, you don't try to hop around, but hopping happens. Or, even if hopping doesn't happen, some strong muscular movements of some kind start happening.
Any
And
kind of experience in your consciousness, any kind of mystical, any kind of lightness, or
well, there's definitely could be a lightness, not a lot of, in my opinion, not a lot of mystical stuff, but it's somewhat similar to a meditative state, because in fact you do meditate first. So and we've been doing a lot of that before we got into this. So, you're settled way inward, and there's that expansion, and then you introduce a sutra. You just introduce a small sutra from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and in a certain way,
right.
and then you let it go. So you, in a sense, settle back into that quieter, deeper, more expanded state.
Right.
And because you it's almost like you introduced a little impurity into a crystalline, thing that's forming, and something, pop results. But no, at the time, I would say it was more this mind-blowing fascination with what was happening rather than a settled, mystical kind of communion or anything. But certainly people who do this thing, the people who are really into it to this day, feel a great deal of, expansion or connectedness, or, those kinds of things during the thing. In any case, what we were told was that this was the first stage of flying, which was this sort of more hopping thing. But the second stage would be actual levitation and flying through the air. Now, the second stage never materialized. So,
And he didn't mean it, and it wasn't a metaphor for feeling like you were floating. He meant you really lift. Right.
It definitely was not presented as a metaphor or as an inner journey. I mean, let's put it this way. The true reason to do it, and the true purpose of doing yogic flying, is not to be able to levitate or fly. It is supposed to be a spur to greater integrated inner awareness, because you have, typically if one is meditating, at least in the sense of TM, it's all an inner settled, quiet direction. There's the activity that comes and goes just comes and goes, but the whole direction is that inner quiet and ultimately complete silence. But if you're doing this, something like yogic flying or other practices, you're introducing an element of activity into that silence. And so the whole idea was this would promote an integration between the silence and the activity. That's the purpose, So anyway, when I was at Amherst in '79, I did hope hope, I suppose, or think maybe this was actually going to happen, something different than this hopping, that we were actually, because for the first time maybe in human history, we had 3,000 people together doing this particular Patanjali yoga practice. And I thought, let's see, but no. And it's kind of stayed there, at least on the external level. Some people will claim any number of things, on the internal level, but certainly the promise that it would be a real physical thing didn't materialize.
Hey, Tom,
Oh, sorry.
I saw a video of a practitioner, a serious Hindu or Buddhist practitioner who was an expert in arousing his kundalini.
Mhm.
Kundalini, I'm sure I'm very familiar with it.
Mhm.
And he did a demonstration. They gave a warning. No one try this at home. And he went into a lotus position on a mat, a little bit of a mat, like 2 or 3 inches. And he started willingly jumping up and down in lotus position, like getting up in the air and doing this real intense breathing, like real intense, like, and he was jumping up and down. And he said that's how the kundalini is activated. Would that be any relation to what you're speaking about?
Well, Maharishi never got much into the whole kundalini thing. That wasn't his interest or his direction.
Right.
But what I can say is, people who are interested in kundalini and those kind of energies flowing, if they were to have witnessed, especially the early stages of people learning this yogic flying and what was going on in their bodies, and I think they'd have a lot to say about the energies that were being triggered or generated.
What did you witness, Tom? Did you witness something absolutely incredible, mind-blowing, or did you witness anything?
Well, I guess for me, the main thing was the absolutely astounding physical reaction that happened based on a simple mental input, unintentionally, at least consciously, completely unintentionally. So it was more like just wow. There's, I suppose, a wow experience about some kind of connection between a mental impulse and the physical body that was not running through the conscious will or intention. And yeah, there was rush of energy, kind of maybe like what you were talking about, RJ. These kinds of things were the common experience for me. It was an energetic and I suppose, a powerful energetic experience. But as to what did it actually lead to, that I'm not very sure. And in fact, in my life and in the life of a fair number of people here in Fairfield who I associate with, we actually stopped doing that particular practice.
Oh, I'm sorry. You still live there?
Oh yeah, I still live in Fairfield.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a fantastic place because
That's
what happened is, being here for those years and going through a lot of these things together, we just made a whole bunch of great friends. It's a great community. It really is an unbelievable community on many levels. I mean, there are people who are totally devotees and sold out to absolutely everything that might ever be proposed by the TM movement or by Maharishi. And then there are those who take what they can use and value and drop the rest and make their own individual lives out of it. But, all of us here in this huge spectrum, many of us know each other really well. And so we have this great small community that is just fabulous. A lot of artistic creativity, entrepreneurial creativity, just a fabulous place.
So if one of your friends comes up to you and says that he did something miraculous, like you don't judge him, you just How do you deal? How do you
Well,
deal with?
yeah, this is where my book came from originally. I mean, it took a long time to write it because I was working and had a family and stuff. So it was something I did on the side, and but it started many years ago, and let's say 10, 15 years ago, the origin of the beginning of the thinking and the researching. But the impetus was exactly that, RJ, that especially back then, 15 years ago, there were many more people who seemed to totally believe all kinds of extraordinary claims about the nature of life and the nature of the universe and how it worked. And it would be taken for granted by them and by so many people. And when I would hear these claims, because even though, like I said, I was open to the possibility of this yogic flying, but evidence rules for me. So if it was not leading apparently to the kind of claimed results that were talked about, and so I let that go. I mean, I still did it for a while, but I let that go in terms of a claim. But other people held on to the claims, and you'd be at a party, you'd be anywhere, and people would just make some extraordinary claim about something. And no, I wouldn't judge them. I certainly wouldn't jump on them. But in my mind, I'm going, what? What? Is there any kind of basis for this? Where is this coming from? We're talking about things like a really strong belief in astrology, or a really strong belief in this yogic flying, or the fact that you could put a few thousand people into a town in Iowa doing something, and it would completely transform the quality of life for billions of people. You may have heard of something called yagya. Is that a word that? Okay, yagya is a traditional, I suppose, Hindu term for practices that you do to propitiate deities. It's kind of like in the old days, or in the Bible, you'd sacrifice a bull to Yahweh, to get his approval.
Right.
It's kind of like that, although people who are into this would not like to hear me describe it this way. But it is you get certain Indian pundits to do certain kind of practices, and that will supposedly eliminate, some negative occurrence in your life, or improve something. So it's a very common thing in this town that if someone is ill, some family member is ill, or you're ill, you go and hire yagyas to be performed, these practices, some pundits in India who will be doing certain physical things, pouring ghee and milk over certain objects and chanting verses. And people will claim absolutely that took care of the problem. So these and many, many more things were very common claims, and I would run into them all the time. And since I didn't share any of those beliefs, but I liked and respected the people who were making the claims around me, and it was so intimate of a community. It's not like I saw something on YouTube where someone talked about, yagyas or Vedic astrology or something. These are my friends and people I work with and so forth. Yeah. And so it caused me just to go on a journey to say, am I missing something? What am I missing here? Or is this in fact a certain form of imagination or projection that serves these people in some way, but is not actually grounded in evidence or fact? And so that was the whole thing. And even to this day, a lot of people know my position. I guess I'm happy still being called an atheist. And I'm certainly a skeptic and a rationalist. And a lot of people know that around here. And so if we're at a party and someone starts into one of those things like, the karmic thing, and I say, and they'll say to me, sorry, Thom. And so it's on that kind of light level. It's not like battling, It's just
Yeah.
everybody knows that I've got a certain position. And in fact, many people that I associate with, have talked with, maybe they've read my book, we've had discussions, they've also moved a long way towards a more rational, evidence-based approach to these
That's
things.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen that, but there's still some leftover value, where they still might go in that direction.
Yeah.
I love the quote you open up with. We're both big Richard Feynman fans, and he was a good friend of Randy's too.
Oh,
Randy would fool him, and Feynman had a deal with him that he can call him day or night, once a day, until he figured out the trick. So he'd call at 3 a.m. He'd call, you did it this way, or this way, and Randy would be sleeping and say, "You're right." And very
Wow.
interesting.
Wow.
But I love the quote. I have it over here. The first principle is to not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool.
Right.
So that's a tough starting position.
Right.
I would agree.
Go ahead, RJ.
I was just going to say, I think that the mind kind of plays tricks all the time. The mind is always
it's like the
deceiving
inner
itself.
charlatan. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a deception going on. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, what I wanted to introduce at this time, people are always interested in, the Fairfield thing and the more extraordinary sort of claims and situation that I'm in the middle of. But what also happened as I pursued the thinking and the reading and the process of writing the book was things came to light in our society that were much more seriously problematic to me, and probably to a lot of others, than whether you believe in yogic flying or astrology or something. And that was what's going on in our political sphere, in our social sphere, where the same pattern that people are ready to believe things for reasons other than evidence, emotional reasons, and emotional reasons, basically, whether it's anger or fear or insecurity or just a sense of superiority or ego or whatever, that people make their positions and then latch onto them. And the danger that seems so clear to me is that lots of people have become extremely skilled at playing the right notes on our emotional or psychic life to get us to come around and believe claims about what's really going on. And we do that for, again, emotional reasons, because it fills some need that we have or something we want to be part of or whatever it is, rather than finding that there's some true solid basis for the claims being made. And obviously I'm talking about things like QAnon and the big lie, the big steal, and so many things that are going on in the society. And even, we get the situation with whether it was the Russian government or whether it was just a bunch of Russian trolls and hackers working on whoever's behest, who clearly were manipulating public opinion through Facebook and other things running up to the 2016 election, especially. Right. And, they're extremely good at it, and they're going to get better and better and better at it. If we believe things because of emotional needs or characteristics, and we don't care a whole lot about evidence, we're in deep trouble, because people are going to get so good at playing us that we're going to be in trouble.
True.
I notice people often become the prisoner of their own emotions a lot. You're a prisoner. Yeah, it's amazing. Thom, can I ask you, what age were you when you were on fire for science and the scientific method and rationality? What do you remember?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it first started when I was 17. You know, was reading a bit, and so that was the first burst of it, saying, you know, let's talk about reality and evidence and logical process here, rather than stories that are traditional and have nourished people through the millennia. So that bubbled up, and you know, even in college, you know, I elected to take a seminar called Nature and Nature's God, and it was about, you know, mostly the rise of deism and things, but it was also the debate between people like Hume and other philosophers about, you know, what the importance of evidence, and whether you could find God's hand in nature or not. So that continued. And then I kind of took that segue into my strong TM years. I was teaching TM and I was pursuing that pretty strongly, where it was always in the background, but the science wasn't as strong during those years. And then it bubbled up again, I think, as I said, when I started encountering the dissonance between what was inside me and what was in the people around me. Then I got, again, really interested in like the philosophy of science and various kinds of science.
Tom, before you were 17, were you, just out of curiosity, were you into music and sports? What were you, were those two, any of those two important to you?
Yeah, it was interesting that, you know, I was academically in high school. This is like a high-end Jesuit high school. I was doing really well in math and science. That seemed to be something that was easy and natural for me. But my senior year, I took this advanced placement English course with this fabulous guy, and he wasn't doing like the classic literature. He was doing things that would be really engaging and interesting, like, you know, Albert Camus and even Alice in Wonderland and Kafka's The Trial, and, you know, trying to get us to think about our lives and what was going on.
That's good. Very good.
Yeah. And so at that point, we actually took a trip out east, a number of friends and I, late junior year, to look at colleges. And we, you know, went to a number of places. And when we got to Boston, I went to MIT to interview, while one of my friends went to Harvard to interview. And but between that summer and you know, when it was actually time to apply, I didn't completely, but I dropped the science and math kind of focus and said, no, I'm more interested in the meaning of life. And since I'd been exposed, you know, I knew the religious thing, but I'd been exposed to this guy who was exploring questions about what is life, what is value, what is this all about, in literature. And I said, well, it's got to be literature for me then. So I didn't apply at MIT. I applied to Harvard and did that, and pursued literature. So it's sort of a mixed bag that I've
It's funny you say that, because our first professor of philosophy,
we
both had him. He was Professor Kleinman, and his actual book for the class was literature, philosophy through literature. You remember, James?
Yeah, he put it together with an English professor.
Yep.
So it was philosophy and English.
Yep.
Yeah,
And Kafka was in there. I think the Metamorphosis, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, literature is a great bag for talking about almost everything, you know, that matters one way or another, and without any baggage of beliefs. You know, that's the thing. It's a more open-ended field to think and feel through these questions, rather than going through a rigorous belief-based system.
Right.
So speaking of Alice in Wonderland, should we get to our little the one thing I don't go for or you don't go for with me
Yeah.
is this beautiful experience. You had some great experiences you put in the book where you described in meditation the boundlessness and the infinite, but you wouldn't. Our difference is you claim that that's just an inner subjective experience, and you can't really claim that to be universal, right? Something like that.
Right.
And would you say it's the brain? Are you a materialist that it's in, or you're skeptical about, you're not sure if it's the brain, or if awareness comes from the brain, or if there's awareness prior?
I'm not certain. I have no absolute certainty about questions like that. My tendency is probably pretty materialist, but I have this forever orientation to try to stay open to the other side.
Yeah.
So I constantly am not constantly, but I'm frequently reading like strong religious thinkers or spiritual thinkers, or whether they be traditional or whether they be new teachers, to see if there's something there that rings a bell for me, that makes me shift to, let's say, the idea that no, the brain is not, or that material is not actually the basis of our awareness. I haven't found that yet, although I would love to be surprised or illuminated, but no. So for now, my default or my tendency is to think that awareness arises in the physical brain.
Yikes.
And like I had said to you once, if you had, I think I asked you this once, if you had experienced this in the privacy of your home, of the boundless infinite, and maybe you experience this oneness with everything, or the self drops, and you have this ecstatic experience that the boundary dissolves, there's no more separation, would you still, like, the next day you would say, well, that's for me, but I'm not going to write a book about that, that's just a personal, where are you with that? Like, is it that you have experienced that and you push it down, like the skeptic in you says, no, this is just too good to be true?
Okay, great questions. To some extent, I suppose the intensity of the experience you're talking about could be a big factor in any individual case. If someone is just blown their doors off, and or whatever terms you want to use to describe a extremely powerful sort of shattering or experience, I think there's more likelihood that they will want to, or just will, ascribe that to something greater, like the greater universe or the greater consciousness. That's just my feeling. I don't have any research on that. But on the other hand, so in my case, right, to the extent that I have those experiences, which again might not be as powerful as yours or others, I don't push it down.
Right.
It's just I go, wow, that was wonderful.
That was wild. Yeah.
That was wonderful, and that was me.
Yeah, but if someone has an experience that was deeper than you, that should in no way be, reason that it's true, because, like you said, it's all subjective.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to what degree do we take people's word for it? Like, we need something more solid, right, than people's word for it, right?
Well, I do.
I do too. I'm with you 100%.
Speaking of Richard Feynman, as we did before, I quoted this in the book somewhere. He I think he too was interested in possibilities, and so he knew John Lilly, this guy who did all kinds of altered state consciousness research, including in these sensory deprivation tanks, where you float in with absolutely no outer sensation at all, and with your eyes closed, everything,
All the senses open.
Yeah, and so apparently Feynman had some mind-blowing experiences in the tank, but he came out and said to Lilly, he said, I tried to tell Lilly that the fact that I was having the experience of some other intelligence or something coming and speaking to me, which is maybe something that happens to those people sometimes. It also happens in ayahuasca and lots of other things.
Yep.
He says, the fact that that's happening to me means I am having a hallucination that's happening. So kind of like you asked, James, even if you're having a very, very strong internal experience that's really outside the box, when you come back to ordinary consciousness, it certainly is possible to just, again, I don't know that Feynman was pushing it away or pushing it down. He's just going, well, here's what I think about it.
Right.
But I'm really interested, James, and I don't know about you, RJ, if you're on the same page there with James, as far as feeling comfortable asserting or just knowing that there is, in fact, well, how would you describe it? That there is an infinite consciousness, oneness that is the universe?
That's hallucinating. This is the hallucination into separation. And just like in Alice in Wonderland, she's separated into Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the Queen and, all the different characters. And then right when they're off with her head, she wakes up in the whole, or like Dorothy, or like any dream at night, you have this whole dream of separation. And then you wake up from, so it's one infinite universal consciousness hallucinating that it's separate people getting caught in its own imagination.
Well, I have no problem thinking that I am an illusion or a hallucination in the sense or a projection of something that is utterly different from what I really am. But again, from a more materialist point of view, I could say that what I really am is some conglomeration of vast numbers of elementary fields, and one field, let's say, but the quantum field fluctuating in all these ways, manifesting around me, in me and around me, that is utterly different from the ordinary sense of us as individual beings walking around, or that there's a microphone in front of me, which there appears to be. but that these are just our way of projecting and gathering and imposing some kind of coherence or story on things that are utterly different. So I have no problem with the idea that what I'm ordinarily thinking as myself and objects is not at all what's really going on. But that does not take you anywhere, in my opinion, toward the fact that there is some infinite consciousness that is projecting this stuff on me. There is something vast and orderly and absolutely amazing that is, in fact, the universe. But the idea that we would want to call it conscious, or that it is the source, that it is somehow projecting me, is a leap that I don't totally understand.
Jay, you're gonna.
Any ideas on the hard problem of consciousness, David Chalmers? How we can get feelings from non-feeling atoms and neurons, like how neurons are unconscious, but yet the arrangement and complexity of them all of a sudden arises consciousness. There's not one theory, by the way. No one has a theory on this.
Right. Right.
And no one actually has even a beginning to a theory on this. But do you have any view on that?
Yeah, I've got that solved.
I'm sorry? What was that?
Sorry, I can't share that with you right now. But no, but there's so many things to talk about that. I mean, in terms of complexity of a new order emerging from something that is not like that.
That's that. That's
yeah,
what I'm, yeah.
Yeah. This is on a very simple or gross level. Everything you see around you has emerged into some kind of unique form.
True.
From
However,
things that are not necessarily conscious at all. They've emerged because the complex interactions of this stuff in the universe, which is just fields interacting, somehow seems to congeal and produce qualities that were not there before. And to say, well, yeah, but what about our awareness? I mean, how could it do that? Well,
you can't say that though. I don't think you can say that weren't there beforehand. I don't know if we can say that, because what we first receive from perception is flavors and smells and colors and sounds, right? And then we speak about what we're seeing and we put mathematical numbers on them and describe them. And then we're saying, well, those things are the real things. The math is real, but the qualities are an epiphenomenon or illusion from the real. But to me, that's completely backwards. That what's real is my taste is real, my sweet is real, my smell is real. But then in the mind, we have a picture of, like, let's say we see a tree, we see the color, the form, everything about the tree. But what happened first? We perceive, like, what's the materialist position on perceiving? It would be, you look at a tree and the light bounces off the tree to your retina by way of photons. Information is put into your brain and it is interpreted to an image of a tree. But there's the first step of perceiving had nothing to do with it. Like the first step, we don't know if we're perceiving a physical world or if we're perceiving universal consciousness. That is something left out of the first step in perception. So it could be otherwise. I don't know if you have any feeling on that.
It could be, but
like when you perceive, you're seeing what? A representation in your mind of a tree. But with the tree in itself, is the tree, our eyes binoculars? Are we just like seeing the world? Like if I shut my eyes and then I open them up, everything's still there? Is that proof of materialism? That's my question to you. That's all.
Yeah. I tend to believe in the persistence of the physical world. And people talk a lot about, some people talk about the idea that consciousness is required for anything, or awareness of an observer is required for anything to exist at all. The sort of collapse of the wave function type idea that somehow awareness is critical for anything existing.
Is it quantum physics say that? Isn't quantum physics proving that?
I don't know that they do. They do say that when an observation takes place, it sort of the collapse, it drops out of this sort of infinite flux of possibilities of the wave function. It drops out and becomes more like a classical observable. They call it an eigenstate, a one thing that now shows up. But some people stretch that to say that, we're talking there has to be a conscious being who observes it. Whereas a camera with nobody around and nobody even connected to it, just sitting there by itself with its little film and its battery, will collapse wave functions just fine.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. A question for you on that. On that, hear me out. When the camera videos the world with no observer around, and then you look at the footage, that's when the collapsing takes place?
No, I mean...
No! Go ahead, you go, Thom.
I mean, this comes back to your idea of whether there's a infinite, eternal, universal consciousness, because if there is, what I was going to say is that long before, as far as we know, any individual conscious creatures existed, say in the very early part of the universe where there was just, there's no way you've got individual beings like us probably surviving in that kind of situation. But I'm not talking the first picoseconds, but during the early millions of years of the universe, or even a billion or whatever, things are happening that can be traced and recorded by us now that require that there be physical interactions going on. There was nobody there to observe anything, but it was all happening in a physical material way nonetheless. Now, if you say, oh, but wait a minute, there was the universal consciousness that was observing all that, that of course solves that problem, but you are positing.
Well, I'm not saying it's observing it all. I'm saying universal consciousness collapses on itself. And out of that is another type of consciousness. That's what I'm saying. And that type of consciousness that comes out of universal consciousness is what the physical world looks like when we perceive it from our human perspective. That's my position, and you could disagree with it. Robert Saltzman disagree with it. But you could disagree with it, but logically, my position has less problems than your position.
I don't know. I mean,
well, let's discuss it.
Yeah. So you're saying, for instance, you're saying the idea of the hard problem goes away because it was consciousness in the first place or something?
Right. Because we have something called an ontological primitive, which is, in my case, I have one primitive is consciousness. And I think you have 17 subatomic particles in the quantum field. It's about 17, right?
That's a lot, Thom.
If you're a panpsychist, then you have 18. But there's so my reduction base, you're reductionist, right? I'm an extreme reductionist. So my reduction base is 1. And in any theory of anything, or if you have a theory of everything, like a toe, the best one is the simplest one with the less amount of ontological primitives. So I got you there.
Well, the best one is not just the simplest one. The best one that can, in fact, make all the right predictions and not ever be falsified, and is the simplest, would be the best one. Not just one that's really nice and unitary. I've only got one, so
you're right. You're totally right with that. Yeah. So your definition is of that. I would say I'm winning so far, but but also, I mean, that's just, no one has any idea how we get love from quantities. I mean, there's just not even one thing on the table. There's things like people are saying it's an illusion, consciousness is an illusion, and not an epiphenomenon, but an illusion, like it doesn't exist. That's one theory.
That's Daniel Dennett.
But I think there's a confusion of what I was saying before. You have universal consciousness, and it folds in on itself, and we have phenomenal consciousness, which is the consciousness we all share. And then there's a third type of consciousness, which is called like metacognition or metaconsciousness or self-reflection. It's called self-reflection. That's a third type of consciousness where we can deliberate and have concepts and know that we're experiencing things. And I think that's where Daniel Dennett, and who I love, Douglas Hofstadter, one of my favorite guys in the world, I think there's the error. There it is. We're saying consciousness is that third level of conceptual thinking, and we're erasing the primary consciousness, the phenomenal consciousness, which is what it's like to be something. That's my view, that there's nothing but consciousness, universal, localized, and deliberate metacognition. There's no physical world. It's just like the way it appears in our consciousness that it's physical. I know you disagree with that, but what I would just like to say is I have two problems. One is the hard problem, which we just discussed. There's not even one like close theory on how that would happen. The other one is in quantum physics. I have a couple of dates I just want to read off because I'm not a scientist. You're way smarter than I am, Thom. You know way more than science than I do, Thom. So, but I just wanted to see what you thought of. You know the term non-contextuality in physics? It's just basically saying if things are contextual, if they're non-contextual, that means that an observer is needed for the object to exist. Okay, so I just want to throw off a few dates and then I'll shut up. 1982, there was some experiments in the last 40 years that were redone. The ones that Planck, Heisenberg, Schrodinger, James, you know all those guys.
Yeah.
All the experiments. They redid the experiments. In 1982, Aspect, Granger, and Roger, predictions in quantum mechanics repeatedly confirmed. 1998, 2 experiments performed, one in Switzerland, one in Austria. Both confirmed the results of the pioneers of quantum mechanics. 2011, Lapkowitz, and 2015, Manning et al. And commenting on those two, 2011, 2015 experiments, was a physicist, Anton Zeilinger, was quoted saying, "There's no sense in assuming that what we do not measure, that is observe, about a system has an independent reality." Okay, and lastly, 2 more experiments. 2015, Dutch researchers Hansen et al. And a large international collaboration called the Big Bell Test Collaboration of 2018. Not sure if you're familiar with those. Both successfully performed tests closing all future potential loopholes and definitively proving quantum mechanics correct. Like after those two in 2015 and 18, there is no object without a subject. And I don't know how you guys can reconcile this any longer. There's only 2 ways you can do it. It's an illusion consciousness and panpsychism. There's an elementary particle in the quantum field. There's a particle that's conscious, and it's in every atom in the whole universe. You know panpsychism position, right, Thom?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Is Sam Harris a panpsychist?
No.
Well, I know
he's not. Okay.
I think his wife is, but
Maybe his wife.
I think so.
Yeah.
But Thom, those are the results, and I can't go with materialism any longer.
Yeah, when physicists say that that without observation there's no object, they may be meaning different things. They may be meaning we have no way to talk about or describe, or even obviously you can't observe it if there's no observer. So in other words, to say it doesn't exist or it's not there means a particular thing maybe to a physicist, and it means something different to an average person. To say that, let's say that the tree isn't there if it's not being observed, is true in physics, because if it's not being observed, then you got nothing to do with it. You can't do anything with it. It's nothing.
I'll fix it. When you don't, with the tree, its essence is always there. Its essence never leaves. But when you perceive it, it becomes physical. Before you perceive it, it's in what? Superposition, right?
Sure.
That fits exactly with idealism, by the way. I just want to throw it out there. I'm not going to do a Robert Saltzman thing today. I'm just saying
Hey, fuck Schopenhauer.
You did all right. You did it. Now this video is going to go viral. Okay. I don't see a reconciliation, my friend Tom. As far as that is concerned, I think it's an image in our mind. Kant had proved, not just said it, but like proved, between you and an object always is the intellect, and I can't get away from it. I had direct experience with LSD. It confirmed it to me, and anyway, that's my position. And I think, and here's what I wanted to say: your position is not affected by my position. The fact that there's universal consciousness doing everything underneath, like the fact that there's an underlying permanent reality underneath this temporary existence that we're all experiencing right now, doesn't do you any harm as far as your rational approach to finding out the truth. It doesn't do any. It doesn't say you're wrong at all. I think that's the misconception. Like, you have a materialist versus an idealist. The materialist is wrong. Well, no, you're not wrong, because everything the way the world appears to us, you're right. Douglas Hofstadter is right. Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, those guys are right on the money. But it's just one prior event before the universe came into existence.
It's the little one.
It's one, but it doesn't affect you. Like everything you do in life, you love your wife, great. You study physics, great. You're right. Don't stop studying physics because someone's saying it's all consciousness anyway. There's no matter. That doesn't mean stop.
Wait, Tom, what do you say about the early physicists R.J. mentioned, like Heisenberg or Max Planck, saying consciousness is fundamental? These are the pioneers that won the Nobel Prize, and
right.
Schrodinger said there's only mind, only consciousness.
Right. Again, I'm not going to be an expert on what those guys actually meant or felt when they said things like that. But to me, it's conceivable that, again, since they are physicists, and since if you're not just a pure theoretical physicist, and even theoretical ones have to deal with observables eventually in order to be actually useful and interesting.
True.
Since that's what they are and that's what they do, it's all about what they observe, and especially in the quantum world, what was discovered, that the observer makes a difference to what is observed. And so to say that they were like blown away probably by these revelations of quantum mechanics, and it's not surprising to me that they would go, wow, it's all mind, because mind is the only thing that's what was this amazing aspect of quantum mechanics. And so but I don't know that they're all saying that there is an infinite consciousness and that we individual apparent beings are some kind of reflection or projection of.
Yeah, I'm conflating, just to make it clear. I have an idealist approach.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm an idealist, and that's what you just said is idealist.
But Schrodinger is saying that.
Yeah. Exactly, James. But there's the quantum physics, which I am not a scientist. I'm only reading what the experiments and other physicists said about them. That's it.
What's your shirt say?
Wait, can you guys see that? So my position is idealism, but what I'm trying to say is there are physicists, and I'm not taking them as an authority, and I'm not taking them as they know what true reality is, but it's getting very hard to be materialist today. No?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
That's all. Yeah.
And I'm not a committed materialist.
Okay.
Again, as I tried to say earlier, the idea that that the vast, almost infinite orderliness and of the universe as a whole is something quite different from me, and I am here somehow in the midst of all that, and I'm not denying that there's something beyond particles, you know. This one quantum field equation, which is the entire universe, according to a lot of people.
Right.
I don't know what that is, but to say that, oh, well, it's consciousness is a big leap to me. Now, I know that the hard problem gives you a reason to say, well, it would be nice if it was consciousness because that solves the hard problem for me. But it sounds to me more like it would be nice, as opposed to I have a very clear reason to say that it must be consciousness.
Well, I'm just saying no one has any idea what consciousness is.
Right.
Like science has no clue what it is. They have no idea. They don't even know where to begin to start a theory on it.
But science,
Not one.
the history of science has always been that way. We had no idea about anything, and then we had a little bit of idea about this and a little bit of an idea about this. But the whole history of science is not having any idea about some big question until we did have some idea.
Right, and we can eliminate things like when we learned the Earth was round, we eliminated it being flat.
Right.
And one day very soon, we're gonna eliminate materialism as being a physical, actual reality, and not just what it appears to our in our minds as, you know. So I know you disagree with me, and I'm not trying to debate with you, but I don't see it.
I don't actually disagree in the sense of, no, you're wrong. You're making a big mistake. I'm just saying I don't see the strong, clear evidence for it. Now, let me throw a red herring in here. Have you guys followed that Google, that latest Google AI, the whole brouhaha about this Google AI system?
You are being conscious?
This is Lambda. Yeah, there's this thing called Lambda. Okay.
Okay.
Which is this super advanced Google thing that can converse with you. And there was a guy at Google who was given the job to investigate it. He was a guy who's, you know, well trained in all these things, and he was supposed to investigate this AI called Lambda, to see, his main mission was to see whether it was biased, whether human biases had crept into the way it describes things and talks.
And we do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So people are concerned about AIs having our biases in them. So that was his original job. But as he was conversing with this thing, and there's all these transcripts that you can see online, he was having these amazing, kind of profound conversations with this thing. It was not like the old crappy, you know, talking to a computer stuff. This was unbelievable. So to this guy, he almost had a religious experience that he was actually dealing with a person.
Uh-huh.
Now everybody jumped on him. Google actually fired him, but a lot of people jumped on him. You're crazy. You know,
it's a bad claim. It's not It's not a good claim to make.
Okay, fine. It's not a good claim, but this is the very beginning of that.
If you pass the Turing test.
Oh, he can pass the Turing test easily, but that
doesn't mean you're conscious.
No, people don't.
You know what? You know what I heard someone say about that, by the way? If you gave that robot, that AI system from Google, if you gave it a choice if it wanted to write in red, blue ink or black ink, it would have a meltdown.
I would not. This guy you should read some of these transcripts. This guy is unbelievably smooth. But I don't believe that he's a conscious being. But I actually just had a...
What is consciousness?
Huh?
Like, what would you define? To me, the definition of consciousness is it's the one in philosophy today. What it's like to be something.
That's right.
If you feel there's something it's like to be, like you feel certain, it's like, you know, you have a feeling, what it's like to have that feeling, what it's like to have that thought, what it's like the whole what it's like to feel is the whole grounding level of reality.
It's feelings.
Yes, I'm with
It's
that.
feelings.
I'm with that.
Yeah.
Schopenhauer
So-
says the same thing.
So, you know,
Yeah.
when you say, what's it like to be a bat? You could mean a number of things. You could mean in part what's going on in its head in various ways, but you also are talking about what does it feel like? What is the experience? What does it feel
Yeah.
like?
What's it like to
bat?
be it? Yeah.
It's sort of weird language. What's it like to be? What's it like to be you? But yeah, to a large extent, it comes with those feelings. I just had a discussion with a few people about this exact topic, and one of the guys was really strongly saying, no, you'll never have consciousness in a human sense in a machine ever. And the other guy was saying, you're 100% wrong. We will. And then I was doing the same kind of thinking that, well, what are we talking about that is that special
Right. What is it?
human quality?
Is it computation? Right. What is it?
No, because the machine can compute rings around us. It can eventually speak 10 times better than we can about
I'm glad you
anything.
said that. I'm glad
It
you
can
said that.
create art. It's currently creating art that some people think is interesting. It can do all kinds of things. You go, okay, fine, it can do all these things, but is it feeling anything? And then, we said, why is it impossible to imagine that a constructed being like that, and we're constructed beings too, in my opinion, but constructed being could also develop, in addition to these other skills, could develop the thrill or the sensation that we have. Like if I'm talking to you and you say something that I think is really cool, there's some little thrill of recognition. That's a feeling. It's like what it's like to be me listening to you talk.
No. Yeah, I'm with you. Schopenhauer would say, like, we know he calls he calls it the will, universal consciousness. Yeah. He's like, we know the will directly from our feelings. Not here, directly from your feelings is the direct affections of the will,
Now, I don't know if you would agree, but clearly our feelings are heavily modulated or produced by all kinds of chemical reactions in our bodies. And if you change those, your feelings are going to change.
That's right.
You can modify them, but they exist in their own equilibrium in people, whatever that is. Everybody's different. But it's a chemical soup that is modulating and projecting all of that stuff. And now all of our stuff is a chemical soup. Our thinking is a chemical soup as well. It's going on in our neurons.
And I would say, just not to interrupt you, but just I would say chemicals are the way consciousness appears to us when we observe it.
Okay.
From another perspective.
Yeah.
Like your localized consciousness, I'm a localized consciousness. When your localized consciousness looks at me, you're seeing me, my inner experiences from a different perspective, and what it looks like is my body to you. If you cut my head open and look at my brain, that's my inner conscious conceptual ego, but it looks to you as a gray 3-pound brain. I know that's really difficult but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I don't see, there's no contradictions in there's no dualism in my theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings on dualism, Tom?
Well, let me just finish that thing.
Sorry.
Just make sure I make the point. But
I apologize.
That's fine. What I was getting toward is just like it was inconceivable a few decades ago, inconceivable to produce an AI like Google has produced. Okay. And that's just the beginning. Okay. And so things that the human being does have started to be produced by something that is material. And it's not inconceivable to me that the aspect of feelings, which in our case, again, are modulated by things going on in our physical bodies, that could also be introduced into the mix of some being that we create in a material way. And it can modulate them themselves. It can just take off from there. and start to have this rich inner experience of what it's like to be him. I don't see that as at all inconceivable. I don't know that it's going to happen, but if it did, let's just say it did. Let's say that there was, whether it's 50 years from now or 100 or 10, who cares? Some kind of a AI that had not only the ability to do all this thinking and speaking and creating stuff, but also talked as if and seemed to actually have that other component running around in systems of generating a thrill when it hears this, or anger when it hears this, or something like that. If that could happen, does that have any impact at all on your understanding of?
No, I think it could happen, but in a different way than what you're thinking. How you're thinking it could happen. And if it, I'm not down with if it quacks like a duck and it looks like a duck as a duck. That's not a duck. But I'm not a scientist, but do you know the term abiogenesis?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Because you know more about it than I do. Okay, good. That's the only way. Like James and I have these conversations about scientists creating a computer that's conscious. And James says, it's a dream. Well, we're living in a dream. So anything can really happen. Like if you arrange certain things, James, you know what you say. But there is a way to create life, but not from putting pieces of matter together. Like there's got to be a way to like you going from an ontological two different categories. Like you're going from a finite material which is already manifested, and that is supposed to generate consciousness. Like that to me is not going to happen. But I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just scientists got to do something where they can create. I don't even know how to say it. Abiogenesis. You know more about it than I do, but in that way, it can. And I'm saying it can happen. We can have a conscious computer that it's something to be like for that computer. So I agree with you. Just not putting matter together and arranging it in a complex way, the way we think our brain is doing that to produce our consciousness right now. I definitely do not think in any way there's physical things in complexity that give rise to the smell of coffee. I just it's so beyond me. I don't know. Like I can't even go there. But you know what? I'll let you respond to that, and then maybe I could do a couple of reasons why I think materialism might not be what we think it is. But I want you to respond, though. I'm sorry.
I don't know that I have a response. I mean, I don't know. I don't know
either with that one. You know, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know either.
I always tell RJ that AI may happen, and because he's very against it, and I say, and if it does, maybe we won't be able to trace back how. Something will emerge, or it'll seem conscious, or it'll be conscious, but it won't be obvious how we got there. Maybe
that's true. I think that's true. Yeah. When we get these neural learning systems, they very famously are obscure as to what's going on in there, and right. the programmer gave it like a very wide leash, and it goes and does its own thing, and nobody can easily trace how it got here to this point. So that's probably true. Are you thinking, though, that if there were an AI like that, and RJ, you agreed that there might be, or there could be possibly.
I'm saying it could be possible, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that if that happened, and James, even if we don't know how it popped into that state, are you saying that at that point it's kind of like us and it's just participating, or it's a projection of the universal consciousness?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, what if this? What if aliens?
Just like the Munchkins or the Wicked Witch or whatever,
What if
just be a
aliens
conscious
exist?
computer.
What if aliens exist? You know about the 2017 government reporting? Anybody? Tom? You don't know about? All right. If there's aliens out there, you don't know about that report?
I think I do. I don't know what particular.
I know
report.
a little bit of what Joe Rogan played with the Tic Tac.
There's a big thing going on. The government finally admitted it. Like kind of.
Right.
No, the government admits that there's some things they don't know what they are.
Right. That it's not
Unidentified.
technology. It's not Russia's technology. It's
No, they don't say
know.
that they know for sure. They don't say that it's absolutely not Russia's technology. They assume it's probably not because they're not that advanced. But
right. But my point is, if there are intelligent beings or sentients out there, that would be two times Abiogenesis occurred in the universe. 2 times. It's already happened once. We're here. We're living and breathing. So it happened. If it happened twice, then it could happen a million times. If it could happen a million times, it could happen all the time. So there's no problem.
Yeah.
Abiogenesis is real.
I
And it
agree.
can happen. And now scientists has to figure out how to do it. That's it. It can't be done the Thomas Metzger way. There's not that way. That's definitely not the way. That's my opinion.
I've got to ask you guys
Okay.
this. So, given your viewpoint or your knowledge or whatever about the universe and life and everything, what practical effect does that belief or understanding of yours have in your lives?
There's no death. You
All's
don't
well.
die.
You RJ don't die, or this consciousness?
No,
doesn't
the body dies. But the true nature of who I am won't die.
But is that the same true nature as what I am?
Yes.
So we're all just the same thing. So RJ goes
Phenomenal
poof.
consciousness.
RJ goes poof.
Was that?
RJ goes poof.
Okay.
He's gone. Right?
Yes.
RJ is gone.
And the
That's what
universe still exists.
Yeah, but that's what we call death. That RJ is gone. He
That's
died.
right. Death. Correct.
So death does exist
Yes. For the
Ego-
organism. For the organism.
for the
Just
individual. So you're not talking reincarnation of.
But
an
I'm saying there never
individual.
was an individual to begin with.
Well, in that sense, he can't die, right?
Well, of course. I mean, as a scientist yourself, scientists can't. They don't know what the self is. Douglas Hofstadter, Sam Harris. I mean, they're all saying it's an. What does Douglas Hofstadter say about the self, James?
Strange loop.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
the hallucination?
Oh, it's hallucination, hallucinated by hallucination.
All right, so that
Which
guy,
is great.
Doug Hofstadter, to me, is like number one in the world as far as intelligence. I mean, I don't know, but for him, that whole medical. Actually, I wanted to go back to one other thing before I continue. One point that you mentioned before about the hard problem of consciousness, where emergence. You mentioned emergence. Okay. There's weak emergence and strong emergence. I'm sure you're familiar with both. You've heard those terms before. What I'm saying is, I don't think we've ever seen strong emergence ever in nature. We've seen weak emergence. We see water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, and we know it. Like when you trace back the elements in water, and you see the parts, it'll explain what it is. But there's no tracing back consciousness. Like when you try to do that with consciousness, there's nothing to trace it back to. So they just say it's strong emergence. Meaning you went from a difference in degree to a difference in kind. That's a leap. That leap to me is why the hard problem has not been solved. That's the reason, the emergence problem.
Is this a little bit like the way the Catholic Church or Christian churches think about a soul being infused in a body?
Well, that's interesting.
It's like, okay, there's there's the body that's developing in the womb, but in order for it to be an actual person, God puts a soul into it, and now it's a person.
Well, the original meaning of like psyche, which we have mind today, would be, I think, comes from soul. I think psyche comes from soul way back then. But the problem people have with that is they think they have an individual soul.
Yes,
There's
they do.
one, it's all soul. Who said that? Plotinus or Plato? All souls, So that would fix the problem of individual independence of eternity existing, But anyway, you know what, Tom? Can I do a couple of reasons and get your take on it? A couple of reasons why I think materialism is not true, and just your take on it. Would you mind?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay, number one would be our dreams. Okay. So in our dreams, to me, it's proof that consciousness has the ability to create a whole solid world out of itself. And since our dream character is not producing consciousness from the dream character's brain, that's proof that in nature exists the phenomenon of feeling like an individual that's produced by consciousness. Is that a clue at all or a hint at all to you, Tom, that, we dream
every night
and a whole individual sense of feeling is produced from consciousness, not a brain?
Well, I don't know how you're presenting that. If you're presenting it as a kind of analogy, sure, it's an interesting analogy.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, we are capable of creating in our awareness all kinds of stuff that doesn't.
How can that be?
It's a good hint.
It's a good hint. I mean,
breadcrumb number one.
Yeah, these are just clues. They're not facts. They're just clues. Like, wow, that happens in nature, huh?
The whole dream, buildings and mountains disappear as soon as you wake up.
It's true. Yeah. But they also have a kind of, I don't know about your dreams, but in my dreams, they have a very different quality than physical, where things have this sort of integrity and individuality that we have in this world, when we're awake. In a dream, it's this much more fluid and sort of bizarre thing.
But you could remember some dreams where you swore it was real. It was so real until you woke up. It was the realest thing ever. Those. It
felt real, you're saying.
Yes.
But it probably still didn't have those same qualities of, you remember that movie Inception?
Yeah, I loved. I read your review. I saw it on your website.
Oh yeah. Even when they're in that state, again, it's just bizarre. It's not like the real world.
But it feels real, so real that he had to spin the totem.
Yeah, it feels real. That's true.
Yeah.
So the subjective feeling of being real, which you have in some dreams, in my world is, again, it's a subjective feeling. It obviously the dream. Are you saying the dream is real in some way? You've actually created a universe, or what?
All I'm saying is that there's a phenomenon in nature that exists where the feeling of being an individual is created by consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that could just be nothing.
and in the dream, the 100 people in front of you.
I just came up with a list of things that to me are like, oh, okay. Sorry, James.
And in the dream, the 100 people in front of you and the tiger and the lion and the bear are all made of your consciousness. And there's this amazing separation illusion going on where you swear that those 100 people are chasing you through the woods or whatever dream, or the tiger's about to munch on your leg, and then boom, you wake up and no more tiger. You can feel the breath, and then it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the laws of nature are broken in the dream. The laws of physics are broken, of course, but what's not broken is the feeling. It's like to be something, to be someone. And your dream character totally has that feeling.
And it seems solid when you sit in a chair. You don't test the chair. You know, when the girl pushes you back on the bed, you don't go, wait a second, I'm going to fall through the floor.
Right.
It seems so solid.
Okay, just offhand, I would say that we've lived our entire lives having all kinds of feelings and experiences and perceptions and stories that we're connected with. We read, we hear, we're part of. This is what we live in for our entire life from the very beginning. And the idea that there could be another state of consciousness where we use some of the same tools or materials that are being used in our waking state to sort of navigate and understand and participate in stories. The fact that we could use some of those raw materials or tools and generate something else imaginatively doesn't seem that crazy, and doesn't to me mean therefore the universal consciousness is dreaming me just because I can dream at night.
But early on in all those things that you learn that you mentioned, there's that song about row, row, row your boat. And then we forget it and we grow up away from it and we forget.
Right.
Until the ayahuasca or sitting in stillness and something happens.
Mm.
But what about you're dreaming a solid world that you believe is solid, but wouldn't you have to have time and space in your mind to do that?
Yeah, well, I think we do. I think Kant talked about categories that we have that we can't escape.
Right. I'm a Kantian.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is that there's no time and space outside. Of our head. There's not two different separate sets of time and space, like one out there and one in here. So with Kant's position, Kant's main big Copernican revolution that he discovered was, number one, that the intellect is always mediated between us and objects. Always, never not. And time and space is inherent. Now this might be tough for you, Thom, to go along with this one, but the fact that if you went into a deprivation tank right now, no sense of anything, no senses, you would still think and feel. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Even a baby who's just born, put in a deprivation tank, would still have desire and fear, right? So Schopenhauer and Kant are saying it's an internal cognitive scaffolding of time and space that's in us. And when we perceive sense data, that sense data that comes in, matched up with time and space, the combination of sense data and time and space in our heads makes experience. And I'm sure from your standpoint, you would not agree with that, but could you deny that we have the capabilities of time and space in us?
No, I don't have any problem with what you were saying.
Oh, okay. Wouldn't that imply there's no such thing as space? Well, wouldn't that be something you wouldn't like?
I'm not sure it proves that there's no such thing as space. I mean, we have our own way. Kant is talking about our experience as human beings, and that's who we are, and that's what we can deal with, what we've got. But that doesn't say anything about what exists outside of us.
No, Kant said the fact that we have time and space inherent to all human beings, there is no outside time. It's all here.
Well, to us, yeah.
Right. But to us, we see a physical world of separate objects, separated by events and objects. But to Kant and Schopenhauer, that only is happening in your mind, because all that's in the world is sense data. There's no time and space in the world, just sense data. But the time and space in your head that combines with the sense data is what gives you buildings and people and rivers and lakes and pebbles and forests. I know that seems off the wall to you, but it is parsimonious. There's no internal contradictions with it. There's no logical inconsistencies as far as this position is concerned. And it happens to align completely with Hinduism and Buddhism 100%. So
which the physicists were reading the Upanishads. And,
yeah. So I mean, I'm glad to have this discussion. I was a materialist my whole life until one day in 2010 or 10. I was in my kitchen and I just was like, it was just one thing. There has to be an ultimate reality. There has to be something eternal. There's no way this is happening without something eternal. And ever since that day, I can't. This everything I'm saying today came from that.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, that insight of yours, although I wouldn't use the word eternal, I would use the word persistent or vast. You know, we don't know about eternity. You may know about eternity in your own minds or your own thinking. You say,
Just
well,
from LSD. Only LSD. That's the only way I know it.
But eternity and infinity are things that we don't have any direct experience with. And
true.
So I wouldn't say eternity, but absolutely, there's something vast and incredibly amazing and orderly that is the universe. And here we are. Now, what I don't discount or deny any of the things you guys are saying as a possible truth. I just need something more than various kinds of analogies or senses about things to say, this is the truth. I'm happy to say, I don't know what the truth is about ultimate reality. I know about various kinds of internal experience, and I can take some journeys into more distant or broader places in my own mind and awareness, but that's in my own mind and awareness. And I don't know, short of the analogies, you know, that you might throw out, I don't know how you get to a firm, I assume you guys have a firm, maybe you wouldn't call it belief, you call it just knowledge. That
James has direct experience more than I do. Like James is the monk. Like I'm the philosopher because he is the one. He's like the real mystic of the parables.
Yeah.
So he has the real direct experience. I've had some direct experience, but all I'm saying is that through that, there's things that necessarily have to be like something eternal. Like there has to be something eternal if we have something temporary. I don't know anyone who could say otherwise. I can't even imagine what the alternative would be. And I did this with Robert Saltzman. I said, so the alternative is we have separation and temporary existence from separation and temporary existence. That's turtles all the way down. That's not a theory.
It's not a theory of infinite eternal. It doesn't have infinite eternal aspect to that theory. I mean, physicists, for the most part, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of guys who believe all kinds of things, but in general, they're just totally agnostic about what happened before a certain number of picoseconds after the Big Bang. They go, forget about it. You know, they might speculate for the fun of it or whatever, but they go, forget about it. And so you go, well, but come on, it has to be eternal. And they go, what? I mean,
well, I'm just saying the fact that we know there's temporary existence, like this is temporary. We're all going to die. Okay. That there has to be something permanent to give rise to this temporary. That's no.
I don't get that. No.
Like what's the alternative if that's not the case?
Well, the alternative, I think it is the common understanding among physicists is we don't know what or how this started. And obviously the idea of time doesn't even exist before it. So they go, a lot of questions become just completely bizarre. But they go, it's more like this, and this is how it is for me. Here it is, okay? Here it is. And you say, here it is, meaning this universe 13.8 billion years ago started going through these processes. And here we are, billions of years later, and that's what we know. And you go, and to say, well, but I know that it's got to be eternal. because otherwise, how could this happen? It's just a certain kind of thinking. And it reminds me again of kind of Catholic thinking, that
See, I wouldn't start that way though. I wouldn't start like that. I would start with the one thing that we do know is that there's something it's like to be me. We don't know anything else besides that. That's my position.
yeah.
It appears there's a universe that started 13.8 billion years ago. That's appearing definitely. Like, not saying it's not appearing that way. James, any feeling on what is essentially first prior to everything?
I just think it's funny that the only way to prove this is to experience it.
That's true.
Which to us three skeptics, 20 years ago, if you told me that, I'd laugh and say, how cozy, how great that it, I have to experience it myself, sure. But then it did I never thought to look within, like you were meditating. RJ was raised more secular, a little Buddhism, right? RJ, a little Eastern, but no religion. And
my father
Tom
loved
and I-
Watts and DTs.
Watts.
Yeah.
But I was I never meditated. And then to go within, and like I told you once, Tom, I think it was you or Curtis, where I said, you have to have your skepticism blown away. And one of you said, that's the worst thing I ever heard. Like, I don't want that, because
Wasn't
that's
me.
the end. It was you or
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, it was Curtis, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be a nightmare to have even Sam Harris, when he just did you listen to his 5-gram mushroom trip?
Yeah.
And he said he was he was really getting some amazing experience. And at the same time, the skepticism would push up, and he'd say, I have to remind myself I'm on drugs. I have to remind. And then he'd say, wait, I understand what the Christians were trying to say. They got it wrong, but they were trying to say that I get it. And then again, I'm on drugs. And then the next week it starts to get more, you become more skeptical, and then it just becomes an experience. And then, so it really has to be blown away where you feel that this is the realest. It's so real. It's realer than this conversation. It's so realer than anything experienced on earth. But again, you would say that's just a subjective experience.
Well, there are pinnacle experiences in life, right? I mean, someone might have the most astounding, mind-blowing experience of love for another person,
Right.
I'm talking all-consuming, just feeling like it's infinite love.
Right.
And that could totally shape their lives. And it's just, there's no way they're going to question it. It's just absolutely right.
Right.
And that they are, let's say, soulmates, meant for each other, et cetera. Or the kind of thing you're talking about, James, maybe, or any of these sort of conversion experiences, like whatever happened to Saul, who became Paul, in Damascus, and the road to Damascus, and whatever happened to Augustine when he had his conversion. It's just like, okay, game over. That's it. I know the reality now. And that's just a fascinating, the idea that human beings have an access point or a means of access to a form of knowledge that is unquestionable.
Mm-hmm.
It is complete and totally true. And that the access is some kind of subjective, mind-blowing experience is an interesting, conception about human life, that we have this access point. And I think that's what happened to you, James, and happens to lots of people, that they said, okay, I went through this door opened, or something came over, and it was categorically different in terms of that there's no need or no way to question it. Unlike Sam Harris, who kept trying to bring it back.
Right.
You go, no, that's gone. That's just the way it is.
And what is that questions it? To me, that's the ego That's the reason, and this is beyond reason, which 20 years ago, again, I would say reason is the greatest thing I have, but there's something that I would read titles back then in my Randy days, and it would say beyond reason, or beyond you have to be dumb, you have to give up all your intellect. And I say, are you crazy? That's everything. It's less books, not more books. It's less knowledge. And that's wisdom, is dropping all your knowledge and everything you think you know, and then you'll realize the truth. It just sounded horrible to me, but then it happened, and yeah.
Like hocus pocus.
Well, let me bring this down a little bit just for a second. You are probably aware that in dedicated yoga communities and various kind of spiritual communities peppered around the country and probably the world, in addition to their spiritual experience and knowledge, whatever they have developed, they also have shown themselves to be more ready to accept really bizarre and possibly dangerous beliefs like QAnon and others than other people.
Right.
So when you talk about, you did say, James, that back in the day before this happened, you'd go, no way, I don't want to lose that attachment to rationality. And there's a good reason for that, a real good reason for that the value of rationality is very, very high. Now, to guard ourselves against other things that come into us on an experiential level, that go, yes, that's it. Now, do you feel, James, that the nature of the experience you've been talking about is sort of singular and is not going to be an opening into other looser relationships with reality, where you could accept things? You go, well, hey, the mind, the ego, that's not where it's at. That's not the ultimate arbiter. We'll use some different arbiter. And is that going to be any kind of opening, whether for you or for other people like you?
So you're asking, because I still feel like a skeptic, but even more radical than I was, and I was with a skeptic that James Randi was a skeptic.
Yeah,
he was skeptical of everything, and he'd even sit down and say, I wonder if that's really salt in the salt shaker. But you have to make an assumption, he tell me, and he put it on his hamburger. So he was very skeptical, and I still feel I didn't lose my skepticism. I lost, I don't even know. I don't know how to, your reason can still come back. It's just different. I don't know how to.
Would you say, though, James, that your skepticism's still there in a lot of specific areas?
Yes.
But there's no need or attraction or appropriateness for skepticism to come into this one area of knowledge that you have attained.
It sounds bad, but once you get to this wisdom, then you are so single-pointed or pure-hearted that crystals and QAnon and all these different things don't mean anything. You're so focused on the truth, and it's so blissful and so beautiful, and I think you would agree, and RJ would agree, from meditation, you would say your life is much better than it would have been without. I often think of all the anxiety people have and fear and stress, especially nowadays over the last couple of years or more. And if they don't have a practice, I can't imagine how they get by. And maybe they find it in other ways, like gardening or whatever they do. But this stripping away and reaching this single frequency that's so like a singularity, the closer you get to this, you are good. You're a good person. You can't hurt others because you realize who they really are. So you wouldn't harm. But I know what you're going to say. Look at the priests. There's so many yogis out there being with their students, and so I think maybe I would have hated this 20 years ago, but there are some bad apples in the bunch, and it's not. It's still a human ego that does that, like an Osho, who seemed to see the truth, but then maybe lost his way, or a Trungpa who's drinking and doing cocaine from the front of the satsang.
Right.
But there's a pure that has. Sorry.
James, if I can say one thing in your regard, we had the same teacher, like a guru kind of, Paul, and I remember when Paul said this blew his mind. When Paul said, Randy is not skeptical enough.
Yeah, that hit.
And then James said, he's the most skeptical guy in the universe. How could you be more skeptical than that? And then Paul said, how about try and be skeptical of matter?
Right. He said,
like, why are you not skeptical about that? Like, and especially since when you perceive the world, it's the second thing that comes into your mind as an image is a physical world. It's not the first thing. The first thing is the perception. So James, I would just like to add that to your story. That extreme skepticism put you kind of over the hump. And then you went full blown, like meditation, monkhood, like after that. Did that play a role in showing you that skepticism could be even more skeptical, James?
Yeah. That's good.
And Tom, did anyone ever accuse you of not being skeptical enough?
No.
Not in that town.
No.
No.
Never?
No.
Well, we're doing it today. We're accusing you. No, we're not accusing you.
Well, I have to say this though, James, when you were talking about the value of this in your life, you shifted from, statements about the nature of the universe, like that it's eternal and that it's the source of all, that it is conscious or whatever.
What you call off the grid.
Yeah, off grid.
Right.
As opposed to, you shifted back to people who don't have a practice like this. What a shame, because they're missing this experiential dimension that is so rewarding in a number of in various ways. And absolutely, obviously, I wholeheartedly agree that having a practice that involves, a settled consciousness, a settled awareness and opening can be extremely valuable. But once again, and I understand, I quoted in my book that famous that woman who was like a secretary or something was given LSD in a research setting, and just the words she used, it's the same stuff. It's like, don't you see it? It's the reality.
She said, "I feel bad for you if you can't see it." It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
And she was just a nice lady.
Right. And there's no question, I have no question that she had that experience. I have had such experiences. And you want to say, this is reality with a capital R. You want to say that because that's how it feels. And so what this comes down to me is, obviously one can have an experience that feels like that and has various values in your life as well. And it can feel like this is reality.
And maybe it is.
Whether or not it is reality or what that even means exactly is the whole difference. And I go, I don't know. I just don't know. Whereas you guys seem to know that it's not just something you experience that you find to be categorically more valuable than anything else, let's say, more insightful. You have that experience and that's the way it is. And then from there you say, I'm quite happy to state that this is the ultimate reality. and that it is conscious and so forth.
And you do that out of compassion because so many people are suffering and you want to help, and point to this, it's like finding a eternal spring, and you don't want to just bottle it and keep it yourself.
Yeah, but Tom, I think, is saying that like you could be deceiving yourself this whole time.
Well, deceiving or just going a little bit beyond what you actually know. I mean, as far as the compassion, wanting to offer the eternal, or at least the unending well of value. I mean, Sam Harris, his whole other thing is his waking up, organization and apps, where it's just dedicated to his particular kind of mindfulness meditation, and because he believes it has all these great values and he wants to offer it to everybody that he can. So one can have that same compassion and that same personal satisfaction, or whatever you want to call it, and that compassionate concern for others, even with being
sure. Randy had it with being a total atheist.
Yeah, did he?
Randy was just the kindest man. And I'm sure the same with you, and RJ, when we were total atheists, we were good people. We didn't want to hurt
but as
anybody.
far as that dimension of wanting to offer this deep well, now Randy didn't go around trying to get people to, at least publicly, to find a way to experience that apparent unbounded awareness in their own.
No, he didn't buy it, but he did try to take away all the bad false beliefs they had.
Yeah. Right.
As you do.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, James,
do you know his homeopathy experiment? Because I know you wrote about homeopathy in the book. Do you remember what he did? He would do it every night. He'd take a whole bottle of pills that was supposed to put him to sleep, and he would just take them the whole lecture and never even yawn.
Right.
It was funny.
Right. I had the intention, I never had the serious intention, but, people around here are into homeopathy a lot. And so let's say someone's got the flu or has got some particular ailment, and they say, could you go to the store and get me a homeopathic this particular thing, whatever the name of the thing is in homeopathy. And I was thinking, what I should do is go get something absolutely different that has no claim to help flu, and give it to them and watch their flu go away.
Right.
Now that's sort of the opposite of the Randy thing, that people who are into homeopathy or believe in it will get benefit. They at least claim.
Like the placebo effect.
Of course. I mean, to me, the homeopathy is the ultimate or the most common.
And the placebo effect is real.
Absolutely real.
Very
Absolutely
real.
real.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And remember Randy's old joke that I think it's the less of the herb, right? The less of the medicine. If you half it, it's even more powerful. And if you half it and half it. So he said, the best is, did you hear about the homeopathy person that died? He forgot to take his medicine. He overdosed. That's a great line.
That's funny.
Really is. It really is. I mean, the thing with homeopathy is they've determined that in most cases, there's not a single molecule of substance. So it's not like it's really reduced, it's gone. And then you get people like Brian Joseph and the physicists saying, well, it's the memory in the water. The water remembers that it used to have. Anyway, that's all stuff. But at some point we're going to end here. So before we do, James, or both of you, this is a weird question, but what do you think I am missing in my life in terms of the value for me or for others in my life by not seeing things the way you do?
That's a great question.
Great question. Very good question.
You want to start or no?
Well, the first obvious answer would be you don't have to fear death anymore. If you do already. Not that you do. I don't know you. But everyone does fear death.
I mean, as an animal, I have some probably aversion to death. I will not I'll try to get out of the way if a car's going to run me over, whatever. I've got all these things. And I'll probably feel fear if a tiger is running after me, he's going to eat me. You know. Sure, I've got all that, but in terms of,
I would say fear of death. I would also say morality. I would say morals change because that's a tough one. Because everything coming from one thing, one universal consciousness, let's say, there's a way that you treat everything separate after that knowledge. I would say that is a key, like morality. Like, James, can you help me with that?
About being good?
Yeah.
Well, you realize everything is you, so you can't hurt anything and you just love everything. But I'm sure you feel a lot of that through meditation already, I would think, right? A connection with.
Well, so Tom's point was, if he subscribes to your view, James, how will his life get better?
Right. I'll take that point that there are various kinds of meditation, obviously, and obviously the Buddhists have some compassion-oriented meditations and practices, and TM is not like that. So TM, it may be true that certain kinds of compassion might develop, but if they do, they happen all by themselves, and there's no sort of there's no sort of emphasis on that. And so I would think that if one had a certain focus or orientation towards that oneness, in a very profound and constant way, sort of, that could have a benefit in terms of increasing that sense of that we're all one and
yeah. And James is so there. He's so in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Can't really call it space, but he's in a certain space where, because we're best friends, I know him very well. I see things dropping away from him, like he's really a true mystic and a monk, where he is starting to not care to explain details of reality because he knows it so much and he's being it so much so often that he's starting to shy away from the explanations. Like, you know what I mean? Not in a bad way, James. I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah, not today.
No, I just mean that your experience has gotten to a point where you don't really care, like, to explain to people in a logical sense how it's happening. You don't, like, you're done with that. His thing is just, this is true. This is what happened to me. This is what happened to millions of others. It really fits it. Right?
And even if it was a brain hiccup or something, it's the most beautiful experience in this place has to offer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And who doesn't want that?
But when you say even if it was a brain hiccup, you're pretty sure it wasn't, right?
Yeah, positive, 100%.
Good question,
I
Tom.
know.
Tom, I like that one.
100%. But for those who like you're not saying it isn't true. You're saying you don't know.
Right.
So for someone that, I'm just saying there, you can't, and you wouldn't deny the experience in your book. You don't deny people's experiences. So this is so good. It's so beautiful. It's fall to the floor, kiss the ground, beautiful, that you just want to shout it, like Whitman, you want to just shout it from the rooftops. So you do it, so many people don't, right? They just be quiet and go in a cave or to go about their job or do whatever. But some of us want to talk to people like you and share. I feel like you're like a brother, It's like a beautiful, even Saltzman, he could be a little tough, but in the end it was a love fest,
Well, for you. I didn't feel any love. I felt zero love. Zero.
But you love him.
Nope. Oh, Tom. You mean Tom or Robert?
Tom.
Oh, I love Tom. Yeah, I do.
All
Love
right.
I do love Robert. Yeah.
And Robert.
Well, I just met Tom today, and I very much like him. Absolutely. I like that you're not so static on what you're saying too. You know, there's a little flexibility, a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot, yeah.
And if I did one clue. Can I do another clue?
Mm-hmm.
Real quick.
And then we should wrap up because sometimes this thing just shuts off.
Oh yeah. Let me. Well, all right. Forget that.
Maybe we'll save it for another time.
Yeah. We'll save it for another time. This was a wonderful conversation, and again, Tom, my position is that there's no way in the world your feelings can come from neurons that don't feel. Does one neuron feel anything? Does what? No. But yet a collection of them, an arrangement of them in complexity does? Wait, you shaking your head? Yes. What about okay. Last thing, I'm going to end on this.
Hey, let me ask you this, Matt. Is there any way that a cell can walk down the road?
Is there a way a cell can have feet and arms and swagger down the boulevard? Is what you're asking?
No, it can't. So
right.
Can a collection of cells walk down the road?
No.
Oh.
There's an appearance of a collection of cells down the road. I give you the appearance.
Okay.
But what is making that happen? That's where my mind is at.
Yeah.
You know, where, and I know we're not going to go into it right now, but the universe is volitional. I know you would probably hate that. It's urge, it's instinct, it's not deliberation. There's no plan. It's a feeling. It's like I'll just give you an example of a flower, like universal consciousness, and I'll end here. Like a flower turns to the sun, not because it knows it's good to turn towards the sun. It does it because it feels good. It feels good to turn towards. And I think that's the way the universe is created, by universal consciousness feeling its way. I know this sounds nuts to you, Tom, but it's not premeditated. There's no plan. There's no destiny. There's just the way in which universal consciousness is folding in upon itself to first create laws of nature, gravity, time, space, and those things fold in on themselves in order to make one aspect of nature react to another aspect of nature. And then that combines into a striving for meta consciousness, a striving for self-recognition, a striving for knowing yourself. And that's how I see the universe, which is Schopenhauer's view, as a feeling process. So there's suffering, a lot of suffering. And there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the last billions of years of evolution to get us to this point. So in that way, I could say I side with Schopenhauer. There's no plan. There's no good plan happening. I will end on that note, and we could wrap this up in any which way you guys see fit.
I want to say thanks to Tom. I put your book, and I'm not exaggerating, with Flim Flam and Gardner's Fads and Fallacies, and your book, Tempted to Believe. Those three are all you need, to me, for skepticism.
James, when did you read Tom's book, by the way?
Over the last week.
Oh, can I know a little bit more about it before we end the podcast?
You want more? No, you have to read the book. It's right behind him.
Your thoughts on it? Your thoughts on it?
I loved it. He covers so many great things. But what I love about it, different than Randy shuts out any kind of transcendental experience, or he actually goes after it in Flim Flam. But and Martin Gardner did not close himself off to immortality, or I'm sure you've read The Whys of a Philosophical Scrivener, maybe, or where he opened. he's like a Mysterian. He says he's not resigned to immortality. He's sort of like you. He won't say yes or no, but he wants to believe, you know.
Mhm.
And so your book is special that way because there's so many, you empathize with the people that have these beautiful meditative experiences, but then, you know, you're trying to protect them from going a little way out there, that they're flying.
Yeah.
Thom,
Well,
I'm
thank you,
definitely-
James.
I want to read your book. I'm definitely going to read your book, Thom.
Please.
Where do I get it? And what's
Amazon.
the title?
It's on Amazon.
It's on
And
Amazon.
what's the
Get
title?
the Kindle.
Tempted to Believe.
Tempted to Believe. Any subtitle? No?
Yeah, the subtitle is The Seductive Power of Claims About the Truth.
All right. I'm definitely buying that book.
I write a blurb on the back.
I'm buying it today.
Yeah. Good, good.
Buying it today.
Hey,
Thom, after I read the book, can we have you back on in a couple of months and discuss it?
absolutely.
Sure.
This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you having me on. Great conversation.
I'm sorry if if I'm a little bit strong.
No.
Okay,
No.
good. I didn't offend you today? Did I offend you?
No, you didn't offend me at all. And
Thank you.
I would say that whatever doors are in my awareness slightly opened more
Yes.
by talking to you guys.
Yes.
We love that, Thom.
We'll see what happens.
Next journey.
Yeah.
That's the
Thank
best.
you, Thom.
That's the best
All right.
remark anyone ever gave us.